Hello everyone, and a very good morning. My name is Don Arleth, and you're watching World News, coming to you live from Warsaw. 14 people, including 4 children, have been wounded in Russia's latest attack on Kharkiv. According to the city's mayor, Ihor Terekhov, the strike targeted residential buildings, schools, kindergartens, and civilian infrastructure. Terekhov stated that Russia flew 12 drones on Kharkiv, 11 of which were detonated in the city. The one unexploded UAV was found by Ukrainian authorities after landing on a roof of a warehouse. The attack damaged a school, kindergarten, and several residential buildings in several districts of the city. As a result of the drone strike, cars, schools, and houses caught fire. The attack on Kharkiv came just a day after a previous Russian drone strike on the city, which killed 3 people and injured at least 64 others. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced that Ukraine is investing in strengthening its air defenses, in particular anti-drone solutions. During his remarks, Zelenskyy also emphasized that the crucial role of the air defense systems play in protecting Ukraine's energy sector.
Air defense means items such as anti-aircraft and other systems. I will not disclose which systems are located where or which energy facilities they protect. Again, as soon as the Russians understand where our air defense systems are, they attack them. There have been moments when they launched between 463 and 500 drones in a single day, so it is absolutely clear how they will act. We have some weapons still in development. Some systems have already been developed, and we are trying to secure more funding for mass production. These include various types of interceptor drones, among other things.
German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has arrived in Kyiv to meet with Ukrainian leaders. Their meetings will center around additional military aid and the current situation in Ukraine. The announcement, the German minister's arrival, was made public on social media by the German press agency DPA. Before his trip, Pistorius said that the main objective is to find out more about the current situation on the Ukrainian front lines and in the cities. He also added he's hoping to speak to government officials about coordinating continued cooperation between Kyiv and Berlin, specifically matters detailing Germany providing Ukraine with crucial military aid as the country fights off intensifying Russian aggression. Sweden has been hit by a mass cyber attack campaign over the past week, according to the country's officials. Swedish banks and government agencies were targeted. The country's prime minister said it isn't certain yet who the perpetrator was, but the Swedish security service is pointing out that similar attacks are often carried out by Russia, Iran, and China.
The honest answer is yes. Sweden is under attack in the sense that there are enormous, extensive cyber attacks going on at all times. The Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency is working on this issue, as well as the national broadcaster. Banks and a lot of other organisations are dealing with the same problem. I recently met our British colleagues at their National Cyber Security Centre, and we're now building a Swedish equivalent led by the National Defence Radio Establishment. We attribute blame only when we are 100% sure. The security service does often point out that Russia, Iran and China are the 3 countries systematically doing things like this.
There was a make-or-break moment for Poland's coalition government at around 4:30 p.m. local time on Wednesday. Members of the country's parliament voted in favor of Donald Tusk's cabinet. Let's see how it went down.
And now, the most important vote of the day. We return to item 19 on the agenda. This is the consideration of the motion submitted by the Prime Minister to the Parliament of the Republic of Poland to express a vote of confidence in the Council of Ministers. We shall now proceed to the vote. I will remind you that, in accordance with Article 160 of the Constitution, a vote of confidence in the Council of Ministers requires a majority of votes in the presence of at least half of all members of Parliament. We are now voting. Will those members in favor of the motion submitted by the Prime Minister, Mr. Donald Tusk, to express a vote of confidence in the Council of Ministers, please raise their hands and press the button. Those against? Those who abstained? Thank you. 453 members of parliament have voted, 243 in favor, 210 against, none abstained. The parliament has hereby expressed a vote of confidence in the Council of Ministers.
Wyraził wotum zaufania Radzie Ministrów.
European capitals watched closely as a vote of confidence took place in the Polish parliament on Wednesday. Here's how foreign media reacted to Donald Tusk securing his position as the Polish prime minister. Politico assesses that the Polish government, led by Civic Platform, remains in a tough spot despite surviving the vote of confidence, adding that Tusk's address ahead of the vote lacked concrete plans for the remaining 2.5 years of his term, and offered only vague promises of change following a cabinet reshuffle. Deutsche Welle focused on Poland's new opposition-backed president, Karol Nawrocki, who's likely to follow the path of his predecessor, Andrzej Duda, and veto the government's judiciary reforms. The rule of law issue used to cause conflicts between Warsaw and the EU. British media called the vote a comfortable win and a formality. BBC even used the term political theater. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced on Wednesday that Poland may introduce partial controls on the German border. Here's more.
If the situation at the border deteriorates and the pressure there, which right now is not that high, rises, I will not hesitate to introduce temporary controls also at the border with Germany. It is very likely that we will introduce such partial controls at the German border later this summer.
And Polish President-elect Karol Nawrocki received an election certificate from the head of Poland's National Electoral Commission, officially confirming his victory in the runoff of the presidential election on June 1st. During the ceremony, Nawrocki delivered a speech focusing on national unity.
I want to build a Poland in which there's a place for everyone who loves Poland, or at least respects Poland. In international politics, we must say with one voice, Poland is our mother. You don't speak ill of your mother outside the borders of the Polish Republic. I also want to address those voters who made a different choice during the presidential election. I will be your president too, ladies and gentlemen. I will be president of one Poland.
Moving over to Brussels, hours after the European Commission outlined the shape of the 18th sanctions package against Russia, protests rang out through Bratislava and Budapest. But according to the European Commission, dialogue will shift the dial and offer a necessary circuit breaker. More from our EU correspondent Angela Skujins in Brussels.
On Tuesday, top Brussels brass outlined the contours of the proposed 18th sanctions package against Russia for that country's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Now, energy is a key pillar to this proposal, but could also be its undoing. That is because hours after the proposal was laid bare, Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico took to social media to state that he will torpedo these discussions unless a real solution is found to what he claims to be an impending energy crisis. He is referring to the European Commission's proposal from last month that all member states will have to exit Russian energy as of 2027. Now, despite the pushback from Slovakia as well as Hungary in recent months, Dan Jorgensen, the EU's energy commissioner, is confident that dialogue will shift the dial.
I want to, of course, underline that I'm not neglecting the worries of the few countries that are opposing this because they worry about their own populations. I wish that they will change their mind and support us in this ban, but it's possible to both wish for them to change their mind and still acknowledge that they need to take care of their populations, and we will from the European Commission side of course, help as much as we can solve the problems that, in especially two member states, that can arise on the short term. But it is something that is possible to solve.
Now, this is not the end of this discussion. Member states on Monday will convene in Brussels for an energy council. They've been invited to give the European Commission their feedback regarding this audacious proposal to exit Russian crude oil, gas, as well as nuclear over the next couple of years. But those member states are waiting for a legal proposal to be tabled by the European Commission outlining how they can exit some of these hefty and expensive energy contracts with those large Russian energy giants. So what is clear is that the conversation is not over, but perhaps Slovakia and Hungary are using energy discussions as a smokescreen to block ongoing support for Ukraine. At least critics in the Belgian capital are stating that a fusing needs to occur regarding the EU's priorities. Angela Scoogens from Brussels for TVP World.
According to a source within the U.S. government, non-essential staff of the American embassy in Baghdad have been evacuated. While officials did not say what prompted this, they cited heightened security risk as the reason for the withdrawal. CBS News reports that U.S. officials were told Israel was ready to launch an operation against Iran. This supposedly was part of the reason that the U.S. advised some Americans to leave the region, fearing potential Iranian retaliation on certain U.S. sites in Iraq. The evacuation order comes amid stalled talks between U.S. and Iranian representatives over Iran's nuclear program. At the same time, U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is still planning to meet Iranian officials on Sunday for the 6th round of talks. In Washington, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told Congress that Russia is clearly the aggressor in the war in Ukraine. When asked whether Moscow would stop at Ukraine, he responded that it remains uncertain. The hearing highlighted growing concern among lawmakers, where Senator Mitch McConnell questioned which side the U.S. supports in the conflict. Hegseth emphasized that the administration remains committed to achieving peace, even if the outcome may not satisfy all political factions. Senator Lindsey Graham pushed back, warning that Vladimir Putin has made it clear that he intends to go beyond Ukraine. Graham even compared present-day Russia to the rise of Germany in the 1930s. The defense secretary also confirmed that the 2026 U.S. defense budget includes reduced military aid for Ukraine, reflecting what he described as a shift in the administration's approach to the conflict.
Department of Transportation, the FAA determines the safe way in which
U.S. President Donald Trump has not been consistent in his messaging on Vladimir Putin and Russia. From promising an end to the war on day one of his presidency to eventually calling Vladimir Putin crazy, Trump has gone a long way in the last 6 months. Alina Polyakova from the Center for European Policy Analysis joined TVP World's Adam Yasser to discuss what the Trump administration managed to learn over the course of failed negotiations with the Kremlin.
President Trump and this White House has learned, like all the previous administrations have learned, that a reset with Russia won't work. And the main reason for that is because the Russian side is not a trusted actor, it's not a trusted partner to the United States, and we've seen that in their actions, obviously launching increasingly more aggressive attacks on Ukraine, targeting Kyiv in particular, building up military presence on the border with Ukraine. So for all of these reasons, Russia and Putin have been saying very, very clearly, we're not interested in a ceasefire. We're not interested in negotiation.
Right, but pardon me for interrupting you here. So, because you said, this administration realizes that a reset with Russia is not so easy. But do you genuinely believe Trump realizes that? And then what do you expect him to actually do now?
Look, the president has said a lot of things. I think there's been a consistent frustration over the last 6 weeks or so in particular that we have seen him share publicly. Obviously, I'm not next to him in the White House. I don't know what he's sharing internally, but it's been very, very clear the president is very frustrated. I think the question now is whether that frustration will actually translate into a different policy pivot away from a lot of carrots for the Russians and incentives to come to the table, which are not working, towards more sticks, as we say, and imposing greater costs like sanctions. That is the big question mark right now, as we're seeing Congress, I think, moving much more towards the sanctions direction.
And that concludes this edition of World News. We'll be back at the top of the hour with more news and updates. But in the meantime, World Talks is coming up next.